Hello, everybody. It may come as no surprise to you that the movement, Black Lives Matter, is starting to spread throughout the world. Most notably, it is starting to gain traction in Brazil and the United Kingdom. As I'm recording this, August 15th, 2016, the Summer Olympics are currently happening in Rio de Janeiro. I am rather surprised that they have not shut down any Olympic events thus far. Although the closing ceremony isn't until the 21st, so who knows. Still, let's start by watching a clip I found this morning on CBC. Let's begin.
Questions surrounding security and violent crime in Brazil dominated headlines, you'll remember, ahead of Rio 2016. But it's a reality all year round for locals, especially for the country's black population. A staggering number are killed at the hands of police every year. Now activists there are wondering if the Black Lives Matter movement can help.
I have no doubt that Black Lives Matter are willing. However, I must ask, can they actually do anything productive? The Magic 8 Ball says outlook not so good. Black Lives Matter protests every time a black person is killed by police, even when the killing is absolutely justified. Case in point, Seville Smith.
CBC's Kim Brunhuber has more from Rio.
Logo seria feito uma vítima, né, o Mateus.
Every week or so, Ana Oliveira and Fatima Pinho meet up. They're drawn together by the faces on this flag. There are dates written under each one.
Saiu lindo, sorridente.
He left the house beautiful and smiling and full of life, Oliveira says, and never came back.
Ai, a saudade.
On Jonathan's way home, a small crowd was arguing with the police. They fired, and Oliveira's 17-year-old son was hit in the back.
Esse policial.
This police officer, as well as many others that kill young black kids from the favela, are assured of impunity, she says.
My heart goes out to Ana for losing her son. I am not familiar enough with the situation in Brazil to make a comment about it, but what I can assure her of, and anyone else in Brazil who is looking for help from Black Lives Matter, is that Black Lives Matter will only make the problem worse. In case you're not aware, favelas are slums in Brazil. In the past, they were effectively pockets of anarchy. Police would not enter them, and power companies would not even attempt to collect payment from drug dealers who lived in some of the favelas. However, I do believe that in recent years, especially with Rio hosting the Olympics, there have been efforts to better police them, even if it meant declaring martial law.
According to Amnesty International, over the last 10 years, police were responsible for almost 2 out of 10 killings in Rio. Nearly 80% of the victims were black.
Ali, a gente está aqui na altura do Morro do Timbão.
Here in the violent favela of Maré, Carlos Gonçalves says 2 of his brothers were killed by police. Recently, Brazilian activists saw how much attention Black Lives Matter was getting in the U.S. So they wondered, would that movement work in Brazil?
Well, I have no doubt that Black Lives Matter would be able to function in Brazil. The question that really needs to be asked is, will it do any good? The Magic 8 Ball says very doubtful.
In July, 6 members of Black Lives Matter came to Rio and met with activists like Oliveira and Gonçalves. One of the first things he learned shocked him. White people can actually help.
Movimento Negro.
Our black movement sometimes gets caught up in disputes about who can speak for us, he says.
So I know I'm about to sound like a social justice warrior here, but hear me out. If there is a group of people who are legitimately being oppressed, whether it be by race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, the fact that they like to play checkers, or whatever, people who do not belong to those groups can help. With that being said, I do not see how white people being shown here are doing anything that could be considered even remotely helpful. I fail to see how Black Lives Matter is doing anything to alleviate the problem of a disproportionate number of black people being killed by cops. Period. For God's sakes. This kid looks like he's about 12 years old and is being taught to hate himself for being white. How is this not child abuse? Black Lives Matter have their heads stuck so far up their asses that they can't see that black people disproportionately commit more crimes than white people. This is all due to their circumstance. They are more likely to grow up in poverty. They are more likely to grow up in fatherless homes. And the problems just go on from there. This is in North America, but it wouldn't surprise me if the situation was similar in Brazil. Sargon of Akkad, who, like myself, is one of these YouTube racists that the social justice warriors hate so much, made a video answering why black people are statistically more likely to commit more crimes. I will link to it below. You know what the ironic thing is? That video from Sargon of Akkad, from someone who the social justice warriors and feminists often brand as a racist, as a white supremacist, as someone who just hates black people for no other reason than that they are black people, did more to actually address the issues that Black Lives Matter claimed to be fighting for since its inception in 2013 with that one video. The bottom line is, you can't solve racism with more racism. You can't solve racism by abolishing the police. You can't solve racism by using thug and bully tactics to shut down events so that you can force your way onto a platform to which you were not invited. And you can't solve racism by making white people hate themselves.
É o que a gente já sente.
Their priority now? Build more bridges with American allies, and build them fast. The way things are going, these mothers say, there'll be more faces to add by the time they meet again next week. Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, Rio.
Well, that's it for this clip. I am an atheist. I do not believe in God, but I almost did today because, no word of a lie, this was the very next clip.
Toronto's own Black Lives Matter movement was active this morning, briefly shutting down one of the city's busiest intersections.
So they are going from one segment where they are hoping that Black Lives Matter in Brazil will help bring about change in Brazil, and without missing a hitch, jump right into another segment where Black Lives Matter does the same shit that they always do that doesn't actually help anybody. Typically, CBC has a pro-social justice and pro-feminist bias, but it doesn't appear the producers actually thought this one through.
Everyone don't get it! Shut it down! Everyone don't get it! Shut it down!
Protesters were demanding justice in the death of Ottawa's Abdirahman Abdi.
So, why are they protesting in Toronto and not Ottawa? I guess that would just make too much sense.
Abdi died after what witnesses have said was a violent arrest last month. Both officers involved were suspended with pay while Ontario's Special Investigations Unit, the SIU, examines the case. Black Lives Matter has called for an overhaul of that unit. It vows it will keep staging demonstrations until that overhaul happens.
Protesting is one thing. Disrupting traffic, especially during rush hour, is not going to win you any favors. Of course, this is also a group who believes it's perfectly acceptable to harass Ontario Premier Kathleen Wynne at her own private home, so that goes to show you the mentality of the people we are dealing with here. As for Abdirahman Abdi, however you say his name, the man's death, which they are protesting, he was a Somali-Canadian man who had a long history of mental illness. He was also a Muslim, so that tells you a lot about his intelligence, right there, or lack thereof. Anyways, to make a long story short, he was at a cafe and touched a female patron inappropriately. One thing led to another, and the cafe was put on lockdown while the police were called. There were attempts by patrons to force this man to stay outside of the cafe. One thing led to another, blah blah blah. It's still somewhat unclear to me what happened, primarily because I just skimmed through the article and I just don't care that much. I will link to it below in case you're interested. Anyways, I'm going to make another video about Black Lives Matter in the United Kingdom. That's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Steve Talon out.